Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Luke Purser. I work for PSE, for those who don't know me. Can you put my question up, please? Is it? Okay. My question is going to be slightly different than the other questions today. So you need to try and answer this question before I get to my last slide. Okay? And anyone who gets it right, Chris has promised to buy you a drink in the bar. Okay? He doesn't know about it, but he does now. Absolutely. So what I'm going to talk about is something that we face quite regularly from merchants as they come to us and they say, we want to accept payments around the world, anywhere, any payment types, any payment methods, and clearly need to know what the main payment types are in certain markets. So the challenge that we had here this year was really looking at solving this problem. How can we support all the different payment types in all the key markets or main markets? There's 46 markets we were looking at this stage, where the payment type is greater than 5%. Okay, so we do a lot of analysis at PSE around the different payment methods and the payment types and whether it's cards or cash vouchers. So what I'd like you to do, if you get a chance during this presentation, before my last slide, because if anyone who enters afterwards will buy me a drink because you've cheated, and therefore, so if you can sort of have a look at this, and one of the things that the exam question that we've got to answer is how do we go about doing this? And this might sound strange, and I know many of you gateways do this sort of problems today. You go around the world and tackle some of these, and our sort of findings from this is that this isn't easy. There isn't a one provider I could go to, a merchant can go to in any market or anywhere in the world to get a single solution. Okay, so what do we got to do? We've got to think about the merchant and minimize the number of gateways because he wants to minimize the connections or the integrations. He also wants to minimize the acquirers or the APM providers. And ultimately then he wants to accept as wide as possible from an APM's point of view. I need to satisfy this 5%. And really this is being driven by them thinking about their customer. They want to give the experience to their customer the same payments when I'm ordering goods, whether it's face-to-face, online, mobile, etc. And therefore, how do I go about solving this problem? Okay, so there are some very easy, and these are sort of a lot of the stuff that we do, and we look at the different markets and the size and the split of payment types. And as you can see, cards remains quite dominant in some parts of the world, but there are other parts of the world, like Asia Pacific, where e-wallets are very big. There's still a lot of cash-related payments in Latin America, and therefore there is quite a complex picture around payments. It would be great. I'm from cards market. Cards are easy online. SCA really got a problem, to be honest, in the UK. We shop very comfortably online, but clearly there are many different ways, and really the way that we try to look at it is try and break some of these markets down. So what we did, if you look at generally about cards from a European perspective, many of the card-based payments and ACH payments, a bit like North America, you can accept those pretty widely. In Europe alone, 87% of all online payments are covered by these different card ACH-related payment methods, and therefore it's pretty straightforward. In some markets, though, it is quite a challenge, and the retailer that was working with this there's some big issues around 3D Secure and online rates. And one of their challenges is how do I make sure that I minimize the impact of my customers? And some of the markets that we were looking at for them had very high decline rates. So Cyprus, for example, 1 in 3 transactions online are being declined. And therefore, that's not a good experience for their customer. There may be particular reasons why Cyprus is worse than other markets, but there are some higher markets. Cross-border in Spain is 20% in some instances and higher in some segments. And also the important to them is how much 3D Secure was in market, because that once again varies across geography. So we also said about cards, cards is pretty easy to accept. And one of my colleagues wanted to look at Antarctica, and they accept cards. This is the British station in Port Lockroy sells postcards, if you want to use your cards and pay, but you can't buy a penguin, okay? You can't buy a penguin. I did ask because my sister collects them, not real ones, mini ones, but you cannot buy a penguin. But the principle around this is that cards are accepted all around the world. And yes, there's been some challenges with the scheme rules and location, where you pay tax, etc. But in general, cards are pretty easy to accept, even in Antarctica. Okay, so let's move around then. So we go to Latin America and we see a completely different picture and some of the challenges depending on the types of transactions that are taking place. There is a growth of cash vouchers, so the use of alternative payment methods in many of these markets. Many of these schemes have more than 5% of the online spend in the market. The number's getting bigger, just to let you know. And really, some of the areas that they need to support in some of these payment types, I know Boleto has been mentioned earlier today, it is important that these need to be supported. And we know how difficult it is for, let's say, European acquirers to go out and try and source some of these. And you see many gateways working with other gateways, like PPRO, for example, and PPRO made an acquisition in this part of the world recently. So it's seen as an area to sort of a challenging area to try and reach out to very large communities that actually don't have cards or lack of cards in terms of making payments. So the merchants need to support cash vouchers in Latin America. Once again, if you look at, this is Colombia as an example, once again, quite a high decline rate of cards online, but no 3DS, so very limited use. So once again, security in terms of the type of transaction, the acceptance of those transactions is very difficult. And we have a very split of different payment types that are required. And clearly, the merchant selling services to local Colombians wants to be able to give them that payment choice when they're checking out. So if we move then further east, then we go to Asia Pacific, and we like to call it the land of the e-wallets. There are no end of different wallets that exist today, and clearly e-wallets are designed to, once again, help consumers make payments. There is a need for many of the unbanked that have access to these services and are using them to make payments. So, once again, it's more payment types that merchants need to accept if they are wanting to sell services in Asia Pacific. So we once again looked at, this is Indonesia as an example, look at the different types of payment methods that are required to support these markets. And you could argue, yeah, okay, we won't accept certain types of these payments, but they are vitally important, particularly to meet the objective or the exam question of more than 5%. Once again, e-com decline rates quite high, no 3DS. So once again, it puts a merchant in a difficult position about how am I going to support these from a secure perspective, particularly around cards. And we know some of the challenges with e-wallets. Once I've remitted money, the challenge of getting that money back in the event of problems or what have you is very difficult. So what we did then is just to try and put all this together as a different payment types, and this is going to come to the answers to the questions in a moment. So looking at, every market has cards. Cards is still the dominant payment type globally, let's say, in terms of payments if we exclude cash. And all the main payment cards need to be accepted, Visa and MasterCard. It does, you talk about some of the T&E type products. So if you think of UnionPay, JCB, Diners, Discover, American Express, not all of those were required in all the markets because their market share in some of those countries were significantly lower. And then you have lots of local card schemes that need to be supported. How do I go about supporting some of those? Do I need to connect to different acquirers? Do I need to connect to different gateways? Is there a different process? What's the settlement process? And on top of that, then you have local APMs. So you've got a whole series of different payment types and payment methods that merchants want to do. And as you can imagine, this is a global request, and therefore trying to find someone who can actually do it is very challenging. So what we then did is sort of draw out the final part of this, is saying, really, how is a merchant going to support this? So you look at all the markets that he wants to support. He probably wants to host this payment page from their perspective, because that was their choice. And what they need is, they usually work under a multi-gateway strategy, because they will force, if they can, each gateway to connect to each acquirer, and therefore give the ability to have this backup. They also play off the gateways, as I'm sure you know, about volume and what have you, that if one goes down, the other one volume suddenly goes up, it'll stay there for a period of time, and then they'll go back to balancing the volumes. It's the same on the acquiring side. So they're trying to get as many payment types and payment methods accepted. And the thing with the high decline rates, if you've got the capability of bouncing transactions around, they will do, because if they see high declines with one connection, they will then move the transactions elsewhere. So there was quite a different scenario of setup. So what we found from this activity, really, and trying to answer the exam question, is that there isn't one solution that everyone can have. There are still many different payment types that need to be supported in several different markets for them. Need to work with multiple gateways. And I know gateways connecting to gateways, and some of the developments that many of the gateways that have spoken this morning and this afternoon have explained how they go about doing this. But it still needs this need to have multiple suppliers. Some of the countries that we work with them, they were looking at prioritizing those countries to sort of choose on which were the best. And it ended up having multiple connections, and really trying to sort of look at ways of how to minimize those through either direct or indirect partners that they could work with. And ultimately, one of the drivers is cost, because luckily in the European market, we've sort of sorted out the interchange rates. So the aspect of cost and that management of payments from a retailer's point of view is being taken away. What now is coming in from the retailers that we certainly talk to is back office consolidation. How can I reduce, if I've got presence in 46 countries, I've got 46 reconciliations, I've got 46 times 2 people that are doing this. How can I improve on that reconciliation process? That is what they're trying to do. They're trying to get rid of some of these back office costs that they survive today. And also, anything that they do has got to be future-proof. It's got to have the capability of being able to support new payment methods. They pop up all the time. There'll be a new one next week, I'm sure. They will just keep on coming. We've got PSD2, Payment Initiation Services. There's a new payment type already. So I've tried to avoid SCA. So then back to my exam question then. So finally, how did we end up? So looking at the answer, Chris, you won't have to buy many drinks, I don't think. So effectively what happened is we ended up with 9 gateways in order to support all the payment types. And we looked at over 50 different gateways globally. And we were able to get it down to 9 with 1 or 2 gateways just choosing 1 or 2 payment types. That's to satisfy the exam question, whether the merchant wants to implement all the different gateways. That was their choice. Now, I see people are quickly changing their choices. I saw that. Someone, you should stop that, Chris. But anyway, the different payment types that we ended up with is actually we ended up with 72 payment types. So those in the middle, 51 to 75, well done, congratulations of the people. And as you can see, 72 different payment types to support 46 countries is quite a lot of effort in order to satisfy the exam question. So we do quite a lot of these. It's quite good fun, but it's quite taxing trying to work out, well, go there, do this, do that. And I don't take promises that we're going to be doing it. That's not what the merchant wants to know. Can you do it today? Yes or no? It's a straightforward question. So as you can see, quite an extensive activity. And still we have the old age problem of, can I get one supplier to support me globally? The answer today is no. Will it be no in 3 years' time? Possibly. Perhaps this numbers will come down from a gateway. I expect the different payment methods are just going to increase as new payment types come down. But that was my sort of, trip around the world trying to work out how to solve payments in multiple markets. So, okay, thank you very much.